Welcome back. Saturday, the Memphis Tigers back on the floor. The Tigers will face East Carolina in FedEx Forum, who are 9-7 on the year. Memphis coming off a tight contest over North Texas, where they beat the Mean Green by 4. The Tigers 2-0 in AAC play, and they've played what looks like the 2 toughest conference games of the year already. Penny Hardaway is working hard to make sure his guys come prepared on Saturday and for the rest of the season in the minefield that is the AAC.
Well, every game for us is personal. We have a lot of respect for ECU because they're capable. It's not like they're not capable. Just because the country thinks that they're not good, anybody will get up for us, man. Any guy, they bond together to beat us because they know it's a big game to play and they come in ready to go. It doesn't take much for their coaches to get them fired up, and for us, we understand that. And this year is just way different because we know what every game means. We're not overlooking anyone.
All right, Rachel, so when you hear that from Penny Hardaway, you know this ECU team's coming in here. Going to be everybody else's Super Bowl, as we've talked about before. What do the Tigers need to do in this one against the Pirates?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think first and foremost, they can't overlook this game. It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to go do it. We've seen them not really overlook these first 2 teams they've had to play in conference play, but like we've mentioned, they really are the 2 best teams in the conference, at least statistically right now. Not to say it shan't change, but I mean, you look at ECU, they're not a bad team. Like, yes, their record isn't great, but there's some things they do really well and some things that I think will potentially challenge Memphis, in particularly their rebounding. They're 27th in the country in rebounds. That is something to me that I see Memphis kind of struggling, and we saw them have just 4 offensive rebounds last week against North Texas. And look, Penny came out and said, I think Musa and Nick and Dane were a little surprised by just how good North Texas were physically underneath the net and underneath the rim and how physical they were in that regards. And so I think that was maybe a bit of a lesson for them. Like, okay, just because this league might not be as high class as some of the other leagues around the country, they're still very physical players, and that's something they're going to need to be aware of this week going in against ECU. I think it's going to be interesting to me to see how we see Memphis clean up the turnovers. That's obviously a massive issue that we've talked about after each of their games, is where those turnovers stand. They had 15 last week against North Texas. They averaged 14.2 a game. And we talked to Penny yesterday. He said, yes, it's been great to have this full week of practice because there are things we need to work on, in particular those turnovers. And so he brought out the old ball rack to see just how things were going. So obviously, if they filled up the ball rack with turnovers that he was judging, might I add. So that could be a little personal preference there. But if they filled up the ball rack, they were doing 17s. Tyrese Hunter said to us, well, he was kind of calling some that the bigs were playing.
Had to argue with some of the calls there.
So they were arguing with some of the calls, and he was like, no, it's just for the guards. So if the guards had a sloppy turnover, we're talking PJ Haggerty, Tyrese Hunter, Colby Rogers. If they were having sloppy turnovers, that rack was being filled up and they were running 17s. We didn't get a precise number on how many they were running.
Yeah, nobody wanted to say how many 17s they ran.
Which makes me think maybe it was a lot. But either way, even Tyrese Hunter said that was a good thing for them because they know that they're sloppy turnovers and they need to fix that. It's one thing if you see something ahead and you're going to force that pass because you think it could lead to a fast break or whatever else, but it's another thing if you're just being sloppy with the ball and you're handling. I think that'll be interesting to see if we see Memphis make an improvement on that this week after what we've seen the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think defensively, East Carolina likes to run a zone a little bit more than other teams that the Tigers have seen, and a little bit this season, the Tigers' offense has been so good, but that zone when other teams switch to it has bothered them a little bit this year. It has kind of been a bit of an Achilles heel for Tigers teams in the past. So how Memphis handles the ECU zone, I think, will be really interesting. Of course, we talk about the Tigers wanting to push the pace a lot in this game, and that's kind of where those turnovers tend to come into play. PJ can get a little lax with the handle. Tyrese can get a little lax with the handle. And I think we also saw it from Dane Danger in that last game as well. He had 7 turnovers, and Penny got into his grill a little bit about being able to take care of the ball. Not so much that you want to take away their aggressiveness and their creativity, right? But I think as long as they can hold on to the ball, we know they're going to be able to score. You can't give extra opportunities to another team, especially one that is hungry to beat you in your own building when you are the top dog in the league right now. For the Tigers defensively, they're really going to have to handle R.J. Felton, who's one of the best guards in the country, right up there, in my opinion, with PJ and Tyrese Hunter. They got to handle C.J. Walker. Those are the 5th and 6th best scorers in the league right now in terms of conference-only games. They've only played 2, right? Each team's only played 2. But 17 points a game, 16 points a game from those 2 guys, if you can slow them down even a little bit, I think it's going to really help the Tigers' ability to win in this game.
Well, and also ECU can't hit the broadside of a barn from three. They're shooting 27% this year. So everything that y'all say, you cut that with 27% from three, the Tigers should easily go win this game at home. If we think that this team is going to show that they are consistent, this is one of those games where they need to come out and look like they did against FAU, look like they did versus through parts of the game versus North Texas as well. The main thing for me, y'all have covered the turnovers well. There's nothing else I really need to say about it. They're averaging 14 turnovers a game and 12 assists per game. You don't want to average more turnovers than assists.
You got to flip
That's
that
pretty,
one.
Basic, elementary school basketball right there. If a coach sees that they're averaging more turnovers than assists, that's when you run 17 times down the baseline in, what is it, 60 seconds, 90 seconds? I forget what it is.
Yeah, about a minute.
Yeah, about a minute. And so, I think that is one of the big things. But for the Tigers being fourth in the nation in three-point shooting, they have a true shooting percentage of 59%. They're shooting the ball really well. ECU are not shooting the ball really well. Meanwhile, ECU talked about their rebounding, Rachel. Top 20 in the nation in offensive rebounds. We've seen this time and time again over the past seasons and a half with Penny Hardaway's team. Teams that really do well rebounding the basketball, you look at what Yaxel Lindenberg with UAB did to Memphis at UAB last year. He was leading the conference and was top 10 in the country in rebounds per game, and they really couldn't do anything about it. The difference this year is the Tigers have Moussa Cisse, they have Dane Danger, they have Nick Jourdain, who's more experienced this year, has become a better rebounder, but they have a couple guys on that team, ECU do, who are averaging more than 5 rebounds a game. And so you just got to mitigate those rebounds. And you were talking about pace, and the Tigers do kind of want to pick up the pace every now and again. They're around 170th in the country in pace, so pretty much right there in mid-range with how many college basketball teams there are. ECU the same as well. When you play against a zone, they want you to slow it down, right? So they haven't played against that many zones. Missouri played a zone in the first game of the year. UConn, when they were at their best, played a zone against Memphis. Even Mississippi State, in parts, troubled Memphis with a zone before they realized they could just go man-to-man with Memphis. So there have been periods this year where that zone they have struggled against it. Arkansas State ran one, if I remember correctly, through parts of it. And it is really difficult to break down a zone, especially when you are defensively sound, you know where you're supposed to be. In theory, the reason why coaches run zones is because, in theory, if everyone takes care of their zone, no one's going to score on you,
You're trying to force bad outside shots.
Right, exactly.
And it can happen with Memphis, with a team that shoots almost 40% from three. You can shoot your way out of somebody playing a zone against you really fast. I think that's what we could see here for the Tigers this week.
Yeah, and I think that where Penny really wants to see those fast break points is in the back half court, in those pressing situations. I think we're going to see Memphis press this team a lot. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of back and forth quick basketball just with the way these two teams, we've seen them play this year. And so I think that they are going to try to force a lot of turnovers with a full court press. It just depends on how long they can go. And also, if they have Dante Harris back, who's a game-time decision with his foot.
Yeah, Dante Harris, Penny Hardaway talked a little bit about him, just his ability to, give a breather to some of these guards. And I think that's really what we're going to be kind of depending on him for moving forward. And B, his defensive prowess. And you're talking about R.J. Felton as a guard who could put up 17 points a game. If Dante and Baraka Okogie can come in there and really, mess with his rhythm in that second unit, I think it's going to be an important part of the game because they have to cut down on the amount of time that P.J. Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter are spending on the floor. Even Tyrese said it when we were listening in the press conference yesterday. Tyrese was like, I can be more effective if I'm not on the floor as much. And we kind of pressed him on that. Like, what do you mean by that? He's like, well, if I'm playing in shorter spurts, I'm going to have more energy. I'm going to be able to get up and down the floor a little bit more. You play a certain amount of time at a time, in that 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes in a row. Yeah, you want to slow it down a little bit from here and there. And don't get me wrong, these are college basketball players. They're in shape, right?
Especially all the 17s.
All the 17s they're running, they better be in shape at this point. But I don't think that's going to be an issue. But the more that P can start to trust Baraka Okogie and Dante Harris on the floor with those guards especially, I think is going to pay dividends here as we get deeper into AAC play and teams have more time to scout and kind of know what you got going on because you got to play them home and away.
Well, and a lot of that's going to come with the confidence of those guys is how Memphis come out of the gates in a lot of these games. If they get out to a nice lead, they're able to rest PJ and Tyrese and let some of the younger guys like Dante and Colby and whoever else go in and build off that confidence and kind of just keep shooting it freely. The issue is that we haven't really seen Memphis be able to get out comfortably. Like
Outside of the FAU game, really.
yeah, North Texas was super close, way too close for comfort. Like Memphis very easily could have lost that game. They didn't. They did enough to win it, but we're not seeing them get out a nice lead and kind of hold it and be able to sustain a wire-to-wire kind of win. We have seen it, don't get me wrong, like we saw it against Ole Miss. They had a very good game against them, but I think now that we're moving into conference, just personally, knowing everything that you guys have said and everything that the fans have said over the last couple of years, there's still this nervous level, I feel, amongst all the Memphis Tigers fans. Like, is this team actually going to be able to live up to the hype, live up to their ranking and go and beat all these conference opponents? Or are they going to choke like we saw last year? And when you talk about that, guys, well, we got it.
It's a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm. Let's go ahead and jump into
We
it.
got
Let's
a
talk about it.
flashback to last year.
We got a flashback to last year. So it was almost this exact week this last season where snow is supposed to hit the Memphis area late Thursday night and much of Friday this year. It could get a little hairy getting into the game on Saturday afternoon. Tigers faced a similar situation last year. It snowed before the South Florida game, and the university asked fans to stay home because the roads were so bad. It worked against the Memphis Tigers. They fell to South Florida at home 74-73, the first of 4 games in a row that they lost, and at the time, they were a top 10 team. We asked Penny Hardaway about this week. He said he might be having some scary flashbacks.
No pun intended. It was a perfect storm for South Florida because no fans were there, and we were up 20. And I think we got so relaxed because it was so quiet in there, and the people that came out were wonderful. And they came back and beat us. And man, I just remember driving to the game. My car was sliding everywhere, getting to the game. And I was like, damn, we're going to play a game. But it was ESPN. And, you know, obviously the university told everyone to stay home, not to come. And it was like, we're still going to play this game. We're going to play this game because we were rolling, number 10 in the country. And then that second half was the worst second half that I've ever been a part of as a Tiger coach or player. And they won that game. So when the snowstorm started to show up on the forecast for Friday, I was like, bro, let's not go through this again.
Yeah, I think we all have nightmares about about that stretch of games really that they had, but especially that week last year. It feels like in Memphis we get one of these snow storms, ice storms once a year, and the city kind of goes crazy. To Penny Hardaway's point about not calling that game last year and not playing it, he talks about ESPN. It was on main TV last year, right? It's an ESPN Plus game on Saturday. So, you know, whether it gets called or not, that may play a part in what he was talking about. But I do think when you're a player in this scenario, this was really hard for them last season. And we're talking about a completely different group of kids, right? I think that's important to note. But it became so sleepy. But they came out of the gates really fast in that game. They were up 20 in the first half against South Florida last season. And I find it hard to say that the snow played as much of a part. I think South Florida just kind of had that indomitable spirit.
I agree.
Just a little bit to come back from 20 in the second half.
The fact that there was no crowd.
There was no crowd, and
so
it's easy to get back into the game in that instance. I think it could get scary for this Tigers team if they don't come out to a hot start on Saturday.
Well, Caleb, you were at that game, right? Last year you shot it. Mm-hmm. What was it like in there? Like, talk us through the vibes.
Well, with me and the 20 other people that watched it inside.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. What are the vibes like?
I remember going.
I mean, you can see it in the shots here. Like, there's so much empty space in there.
I remember going into not the locker room, but our locker rooms, the photographer, reporter locker rooms, and talking to somebody who I was shooting the game next to, and we were just talking like, this team might go to the Elite Eight. You know,
it was that kind of vibe.
It was that type. You know, they were ranked 10th in the country going into the game. Like, oh, this is great. And then South Florida just came out, and Memphis just missed every shot that you thought that they could make, and they were able to pretty much extinguish David Jones. It was a perfect storm, as they said. But this year, I don't think, like last year was more of an ice storm. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting into the meteorology of it, but This year, I think that more fans will be there. Definitely don't come out to the game if you feel unsafe or you don't have a four-wheel drive car. But this year feels a little bit different. The stakes aren't as high in this game, and at the time, the stakes were really high because Memphis was 10th. Memphis aren't ranked as high, so
10 to 19. It's that drastic. The stakes aren't as high.
That's a
anymore?
huge difference. Yeah.
I mean, the stakes are still pretty high. You lose this, you drop out of the top 25.
Again,
Like
because
that.
they will.
Yeah.
Every time they lose, they drop out of the top
Definitely.
25.
I don't see them losing this game, though. I don't see them losing this game at all. I think I laid it out how they beat this team, and unless ECU play out of their minds defensively, and we just have terrible shooting nights from Memphis's big three, I don't see there's any way that they lost to UNC Greensboro, UNC Wilmington, one of those UNC teams not that long ago, about a month ago. This is not a great team. Statistically, they don't look that bad, but their bad statistics are really bad,
I mean, I don't see them losing either, and they shouldn't lose. That's the main point we're trying to make here. But crazier things have happened, and just like last year, did anyone think they were going to lose to South Florida?
South Florida was good going into the
Yeah,
game. South Florida was good.
Okay, when they were up by 20, did you think they were going to lose?
No,
No,
you get in there at halftime, they're up 20, they're like, oh, we're gonna cruise, we're gonna get out early, we're gonna have an easy press conference and all this kind of thing, asking Penny questions, and it was just like you're just kind of watching a slow, painful death. Death by 1,000 cuts is what it felt like. But to everybody's point, South Florida last year was a much better team than the East Carolina team that they're gonna face this week, and I think this Memphis Tigers team is a better team collectively, chemistry-wise, talent-wise, probably comparable to the team that they had last year. There's no reason they should have the nightmares in this one. And Nick Jourdain should be like, hey, guys, I need y'all to come to play, because I'm sure he's having similar nightmares that Penny Hardaway had as well. So that game going to be on Saturday, 1 o'clock, ESPN+. If you obviously are in the Mid-South, check it out in FedEx Forum. But be safe. Please get in there to
Bring
to
your
that game.
sled. Just sled to the game.
Bring your sled to the
Catch
game.
a big hill, and then all of a sudden you'll be there.